Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Path of Exile 2 review video. This is actually going to be a pretty positive video because a lot of people seem to think that I hate this game because of the various previous review videos where I talk about the things that I don't like about the game. And the problem is that most people don't understand that two things can be true at the same time. I wouldn't have over 300 hours into this game, have played through the campaign multiple times, have done, have two characters at level 80 plus at this point, if I didn't actually enjoy the game as an overall experience. There are just some things that just really get on my nerves about the game, and I'd really like for them to change those things because, in my view, they're just irritating. They don't really add anything. They don't make the game more interesting. But that said, I do want to take a moment to kind of go through and talk about the things that I actually really do like about the game, to kind of explain why I'm still here, why I'm still playing the game, why I'm not moving on to, say, trying to do something else, because there are certain things about it that get me coming back to continue to play the game. And to do this, I want to kind of give you the experience in the order in which you would experience in the game, especially for those of you who haven't played the game before. And for those of you who have, it'll kind of give you an intuitive sense of how these things kind of are introduced to you over the course of the game. So obviously, when you first drop into the game, you see the new graphics, you see the amazing visuals and everything. You're dropped into this world where not only is it just highly visually detailed, it has new updated graphics, and it looks really nice and very pretty. And you hop into the game, and it's really, you're immediately overcome by how much better it looks than Path of Exile 1, which obviously is a very old game at this point. It's very old technology. The graphics in that game are very old, and you can't really do a comparison between the two. But if you've played both games, as I have, you know that you look at the old game, and then you look at the new game, and then you look at the old game, and you look at the new game, and it's like, wow, this is much better. And obviously it's going to be because it's a new game. But I have to say that over the entire course of the game as you're playing, the graphical experience is just massively awesome. It's massively superior to obviously the original game, but just in general for a game, especially for a game that will eventually be a free-to-play game, the graphics are just really, really good. And the entire experience as you're going through the game is just, it's pleasing to your eyes. It's pleasing. You're wanting to see all of the cool different things, all of the spell effects, all of the environments, all of the character models, all of that stuff. It's all just really good. So, you hop into the game and you're immediately hit by that graphical experience, and then you're given tutorials. Tutorials are actually a thing in this game, which is a massive improvement over the original game, and just a lot of games in general. A lot of games just don't really do a good job of giving you tutorials. And especially when you start getting into like the gems and stuff like that, they actually give you videos of what each of the skills do. And that makes it very helpful for new players who aren't ready to start like looking into build guides and stuff like that, to just kind of play around with the different skills and see what it is that they want to do. Teaching you how to not only equip weapons, but also, how to use your flasks, because a lot of people aren't going to know about that. They're going to have to figure, they're not going to be like, they're going to die. And if they didn't have the little flask notification, they're saying, hey, you need to do that. Hey, you need to dodge roll. Hey, you need to do this, that, and the other thing. Having, basic tutorials that tell you, how to socket your gems and things like that. Like that wasn't a thing in the original game, and having that now is absolutely a much better experience for new players. Obviously, I think a few more systems probably need to have some of those hand-holdy kind of tutorial things added, but those are easy. Given the fact that they already have some kind of a tutorial setup in mind, I don't think that that's going to be something that's really too hard to add to the game. Now, for me, the absolute biggest game-changing, probably going to keep me from ever going back to Path of Exile 1 and play that game ever again, is the WASD option. I've been waiting for this ever since I heard that this game was going to have it. And now that I have it, I can't see going back to ever playing Path of Exile 1 ever again, because I never really liked the clicky nature of Path of Exile 1. It's one of those things that I just, like Diablo and Path of Exile 1 and all these old games that were just point and click to go everywhere. I've never been a big fan of that. I put up with it because it was the only option for a while, but now we have an option that allows us to use our keyboard to move around, and oh my god, at least for me, I know for some people you're not going to care about it, but for me, that is absolutely a completely game-changing experience, and being able to just move around the keyboard and just only use the mouse to interact with things is, that's the way I want to play, and holy crap, it makes combat way more intuitive and fun for me because I'm not having to worry about my mouse controlling where my character is going. I can just use my mouse for targeting. I can just use my keyboard for moving around and dodging and mobility and all of that stuff. And while it does make accessing some of the abilities a little bit more awkward and weird because, you're having to, move your fingers from moving to using an ability in the movie, like it does get a little bit clunky, but compared to having to use my mouse to, move to point where I want my character to go and just having to constantly be like, I don't like that. That irritates me, and I'm really glad that they moved to a WASD model, and because it just, for me, it makes the combat more intuitive and fun. I mean, in general, the combat in this game, for me, is more intuitive and fun, at least through the campaign, because, I'm not a huge fan of the way dodge roll is required in certain situations because I don't like things that require the player to have physical response time things. I like systems that allow you to just kind of plan out your character so that that's not a thing. But the more active style of play is something that grows on you over time, and it feels more like you would want to do it than in the original game, especially because rather than just clicking around and your character just does what it does, you feel more in tune with your character. You feel like you're more involved with your character's combat than in the original game. So it's kind of it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of a thing. I don't like that. In certain boss fights, especially, the dodge roll is absolutely mandatory, and you have to time it perfectly or you're going to die. There's several situations where that happen, but that's only a few occasions, and for the most part, the dodge roll is actually a really nice addition to the way that fighting happens. So I don't want to sign off on it completely, but it is, for the most part, it's actually a really nice positive change to the game. Now, the story in this game, you get through, you drop into the intro area, you learn a little bit of combat, you learn how to dodge roll, you learn how to equip some gear and things like that. And then you get to the first village and you're exposed to the story, which in this game is absolutely worlds apart from the first game. In the first game, the story is just kind of a thing they tacked on into the background to kind of justify, the path that you're taking of going through this stuff. In this game, the story is actually an integral part of what you're doing. You're introduced to the characters. The characters have a story that they have specific things that they want you to do, and it feels like the story was done first, and then all of the rest of the stuff was added to complement the story. I don't know if that was the case, but it feels that way because the story actually has things that point you in a direction, and it's all kind of a linear story. It doesn't feel like just a bunch of random things that were kind of hodgepodge together. Because in the first game, you have the siren, right? But everything that leads up to the siren has like 3 or 4 different pathways and stories and things that are happening, and it doesn't feel like it's kind of leading you anywhere. You just have this kind of end goal of, oh, we need to get to this place, and then there's just a bunch of different random things that you do. In this game, the story feels like it was kind of written from beginning to end, and the little side questy things that you do feel like side quests and not just a bunch of little main quests that just kind of got mashed together. And the biggest thing about the story for me is that it actually does have, it actually has a bunch of memorable things that happen into it, and certain story elements that when I go back through them, they kind of get me a little bit every time. Like the first time, in the first act, when you go and the executioner does his freaking chopping off the head thing, is brutal every time you see it. Not because you're watching him cut some dude's head off, like, obviously, that's just a bit of violence. The fact that his wife is tied up and has to sit there and watch it, and the agonized anguish scream when she sees it happen. I mean, even after a bunch of times seeing that, I still have a little bit of a, ooh, that hurts. That sucks. And then obviously you go into Act 2, and the first time you see all of those slaves pulling the caravan is like, you don't really think too much about it at first until you go back through with the witch and you hear her say that the operation would be much more efficient if they were dead, and then you realize, oh, they're not undead. I thought these guys were undead. These guys are living people. Holy crap. Like in modern times, like including that in a story is almost like taboo. Like so you see that and you realize, holy crap, those aren't dead people. They look like they're dead, but they're not dead. Like that's ooh, that kind of hurts. And then, Act 3, you get to actually go back in time and see the Val culture in its prime. And, You go through the entire first game hearing about the Val. You think the Val are kind of an interesting thing, but you actually get to go back and see them in their habitat via a time travel portal. I just think that's kind of cool. So, you know, the story overall is just much better. The NPCs are just way better. I remember them a lot more. You know, you go through and you remember Una, obviously, but even some of the side characters like Renly and all of that stuff, they stand out a little bit more to you because the characters feel a little bit more authentic and real. You know, obviously Asala in the second act, who you interact with quite a lot, but even the trade vendors, especially the old lady who helps you out with the horns. I don't remember her name. I don't really pay much attention to that, but you know, she has this kind of sweet old lady quality that just kind of grabs your attention. She's just a much more interesting character than a lot of the NPCs that you encounter in the first game. And then in Act 3, obviously, you deal with the Optimist. I can't remember her damn name. The one that gives you the currency trade, and she's the Val Explorer. She cuts her hand and opens the portal and all this stuff. The name just won't come to me right now. I'm terrible with names. But, you know, you remember her. She's a much more interesting character. She comes along for the ride. You interact with her a lot. So I just feel like the NPCs in this game are much more interesting because... they're inserted into the story and into your gameplay experience quite a lot more, but they're just much more interesting people in general because you get more access to who they are and what kind of their philosophy is on things, and you know, it's just a lot more interesting. So that's how I feel about the story and the NPCs and all that stuff. As you're moving through all of the story and the areas and all of that stuff, the world map itself is much more interesting, obviously visually interesting because it's a much better upgraded map, but it's also just a lot more informative because it has a bunch of different points of interest in some of the areas that tells you, hey, there's this thing that you could go do or this thing that you could go do, and it actually tells you whether you did them or not, because a lot of times, you know, you might actually do something and not realize that that was a thing you were supposed to complete, and having that information in the world map is much nicer. Now, obviously, throughout the course of the game, you're going to be working on trying to get better gear and upgrading your stuff and getting better spells and things like that. And I really like that they moved away from having sockets on your gear and having your gems going into that, and moving towards a sort of separate ability system and having your gear more specific towards helping you out with your stats and all of that stuff, and not being something that you have to rely on for getting your abilities. And the reason why is that a lot of times in the first game, the sockets that you had on your gear was the end-all be-all of everything that you did, and if you happen to get lucky to get some stats on it, that's great, but that wasn't really what you were going for. At the end of the day, you were going for a 6-link, a 6-socket, 6-link chess piece, as many links on other things as you could get, and that was the thing that determined whether a piece of gear was good or not. In this game, I like that you can specifically target certain stats. Like if I want a bunch of life, I can find gear that has a bunch of life on it, and that's going to really boost my life. And I don't have to worry about whether that thing has the sockets and links that I need and happens to have life on it. Now, there's a lot of things about the crafting system in Path of Exile 2 that I and many others really don't like. I am not a fan of the fact that everything is just RNG now. I want the crafting system from PoE 1, at least a version of it back, so that I can have a little bit more control over my destiny. But when it comes to the sockets and colors and all of that stuff that you had to worry about from the first game, I think it's a massive improvement to make it so that gear is separate from your abilities. I think it's a correct decision. I think that that's the way it really should be. I like it much better, and it's one of the reasons why I prefer this game over the original game. Now, the gem system itself, a lot of people don't like it because of various different reasons. I honestly think that overall it's a much better system. Obviously, being limited in your support gems, I'm not that big of a fan of. I can understand kind of the philosophy behind it, but we're not going to talk about the negative aspects of it. The positive things that I like about the gem system is obviously it separates your abilities from your gear. I think that's extremely important because it allows you a little bit more choice in the way that you set your character up. But also just the fact that because you're no longer having to worry about gem experience points, it allows you a lot more freedom in being able to play around with different skills. And I think a lot of people overlook that when they worry about the difference between the new system versus the old system. Just the fact that on my Titan, my Bone Shatter Titan, I was able to just kind of play around with different levels of my Leap Slam to kind of prime the enemies for stun. Like I can just go I can just go swap out a gem, right? I don't have to buy a gem and then level that up through the process. I can just go, I can take a gem of the level that I want, cut that gem to whatever skill I want, and see if that works for whatever specific thing that is that I'm trying to do. So it just gives you more options, I think. Obviously, there are trade-offs with the whole, you'll have a very limited number of support gems, especially if you're not able to get the currency you need to add sockets to your gem. But overall, I think that the system is just much better. It provides you a much more control over what you have going on. And, there are some changes that they could make, but I think just the system itself, the bones of it, is much better than the original system. I really didn't like the experience, leveling up your gems from the first game, because it's super frustrating when you want to change, like maybe you want to completely change your build, and now you have to go through this process of just leveling your gems all the way up again. Whereas in this one, you just cut a new gem and you move on and you try out a new build. And I think that's kind of a cool thing. Spirit in this game, oh my god, I like it so much better than Life and Mana Reservation. It is a horrible thing to want to be able to have like an aura skill or something like that, but you have to choose between whether you're going to have the abilities of that aura or you're going to cut your life in half or something like that. So having a separate pool of energy that you draw from to power your aura skills is good, because the limited amount of spirit that you get in general is going to limit the number of auras that you can have, which is a good way to go. And then obviously there is gear and stuff in the game that can increase that pool if you really want to focus on increasing the number of auras or the higher quality auras that you want. I think that that's a very good way to go, rather than saying, nope, you're just going to sacrifice a certain portion of your mana and you have to figure out a way to deal with that. So personally, I think that it's just a better way to go. I like it a lot. I like it a lot more than, having to see my health bar go poof, or having to see my mana bar go poof. That hurts. It hurts when you have to see that. And then finally, you go through the campaign, you fight all the bosses. I have a lot of things to say about some of the bosses in the game, but overall, it's not too bad. And then you get to the end game, and you get to the final. You look at that the overland map for the Atlas the first time, and you're like, oh, this is way better. This is way better. I really like, one of the things about the first game is the end game Atlas felt like a checklist. It was a very finite document, and you had very specific things that you had to go do, and then you were done. The Overland Atlas in Path of Exile 2 feels much more like a continuing adventure. You're continuing to travel overland and visit all of these different places, and it makes you feel like you're actually going to these places rather than just teleporting to some esoteric place. So I really like the idea of the endgame map system as it is implemented right now. I have a myriad issues with the actual implementation of how the mechanics of it works, but the idea of just having this big map that you travel over, and it makes you feel like you're on a continuing journey, I like that. Waystones, I feel, have some issues. There's a bunch of other things that I've talked about in other videos that I feel have issues, but the idea is much better than what the original version of the Atlas system was. So I feel like that kind of covers most of the things that I really enjoy about the game. Obviously, I wanted to try out as many of the cool builds that I saw other people coming up with as I can. I still don't feel like the game is in a place where you, as just a normal gamer, would be able to put together your own build and have any kind of real success. It's the whole illusion of choice thing. There are just meta decisions that you still have to make in this game to make a functional character, and most of those are going to conglomerate into a specific list of builds that you can play. But for the most part, there's just a lot in this game that I can recommend. It's why I would still recommend that somebody play the game. I don't know that I would recommend spending $30 on it to play it right now. Maybe wait until the game actually comes out if you're on the fence about it. But I do really enjoy the game. There's a reason I've put so many hours into it, and this list right here is, most of why that is. So hopefully that made some sense to you guys. I know I talk a lot of crap about some of the things in this game, especially like, the ascension process. I can't stand the ascension process in this game because, a lot of times it ends up in a massive waste of time. But the rest of this stuff, that's most of the game. All the stuff on the list here is most of the game. And it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing with all the rest of the stuff. Those are really, in the grand scheme of things, in my view, they're a small portion of the game that's just really, really irritating and could be easily fixed if the developers decided it. But the rest of this stuff over here, this is actually most of the game. This is actually most of what you spend your time on. and this is why the game is worth playing. So thank you very much for watching. Be sure to click the like button, subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers, join as a member for early access to videos, among other perks, or you can just leave YouTube's version of a tip with that thanks button. I also have PayPal and Patreon links in the description if you prefer to go that route, or you can just leave YouTube. Oh, I'm redoing things. Sorry. So because some people like to go outside the YouTube economy, and I have those links there for you in case you want to do that. So again, thanks for watching. Be sure to come back for future videos, and I'll see you then.